Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us here tonight. Before we start our program, I'm going to immediately turn things over to my colleague, Tiny Torres, our operations manager, and to instruct on Spanish interpretation and introduce our Spanish interpreter. Tiny, feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Cal. Buenas tardes a todos y gracias por acompañarnos. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. Para acceder a este servicio de traducción, por favor oprima el botón abajo de su pantalla y seleccione el botón para español. Le damos las gracias a Betzy Chavez, quien nos brinda la interpretación en español esta tarde. Now turning it over to my colleague Cal.
Cal, you're muted.
I pulled a 2020 move there, and it's just really, really hard to shake that. Thank you so much, Ariana. I will start again by welcoming and thanking everyone for joining us this evening. My name is Callum Weeks, and I am the Policy Director for Generation Housing, and clearly quite good with technology. Thanks to both Tiny and Betzy for their translation assistance, always appreciated. And with that, I'd like to kick things off by providing an overview of today's webinar and the topics we will address. The overarching goal of this webinar is to evaluate and offer insight on where we stand in terms of water, sewage, transportation infrastructure relative to projected growth of residential projects in Sonoma County. And really, we hope at the end of the webinar, everyone has or leaves with a better understanding of our capacity to build more while continuing to sustainably manage our infrastructure and natural resources. Now, just a little bit about Zoom participation. For this webinar, we invite the audience to submit questions using the Q&A function, which will be located at the bottom of your screen. You should see a little box, and it's a Q&A. It should be dead center. And we encourage you to submit a question and upvote the ones you'd most like answered, which we'll get to after the moderated discussion remarks. So with that, I would like to kick things off officially and introduce Ariana Díaz de León. She is a friend and Sonoma County All-Star. She's also the Patient and Community Engagement Manager at Santa Rosa Community Health, where she oversees patient advisory boards and community partnerships. She has a background in social work and public administration and has been actively involved in various community organizations in Sonoma County over the years, including Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women. And she now also actually serves on the Santa Rosa Community Advisory Board with me and is a 4Cs Sonoma County board member. Thanks for being here, Ariana, and you have the virtual floor.
Thank you so much, Cal. I want to say thank you to the Gen H team for putting on this webinar to focus on our infrastructure and water capacity, especially as it relates to housing. I'm thrilled to be the moderator today, and as someone who's lived in Sonoma County for 10 years and is invested in our community members, especially those who lack access to housing, I'm really excited for this conversation. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our two guest speakers, which we have two experts with us here today, Suzanne Smith and Grant Davis. So now I'm going to invite them both to the floor currently. And I'm going to start off by sharing a brief introduction for the two of them, but this is just a very small snippet of their accomplishments over the years in Sonoma County. And I'll begin by introducing Suzanne Smith. Suzanne has been the executive director of Sonoma County Transportation Authority since 1997 until her retirement this very month. And congratulations on that, Suzanne. Suzanne's overall responsibilities include securing and coordinating regional, state, and federal funding for projects and programs related to transportation and climate change, managing the measure on sales tax, overseeing long-range planning related to transportation, housing, jobs, and climate change, and collaborating with partner agencies and the public on policy priorities. Welcome, Suzanne. We're happy you're here. And Grant Davis, General Manager of Sonoma Water, oversees vital functions, including providing drinking water to residents in Sonoma and Marin counties, wastewater management, flood protection efforts, and a watershed restoration program. Grant has a strong background in water management, including serving as Director of the California Department of Water Resources, and is actively involved in various state and regional initiatives for water resource management and climate resilience. Welcome, Grant. Glad to have you here. And we're going to get started with this conversation. We have a set of questions, but this really is just to guide us as we work our way through having this dialogue. And I do want to reiterate to audience members, if you have questions along the way, use the Q&A button to drop them in there. And once we reach the end of this conversation, we'll turn to the audience questions. Okay, we're going to start with you, Grant. We've had quite a few dry years here in Sonoma County and in California, and that has created an impact locally. And we know that this year we've had more precipitation, which is very welcome, but give us an understanding of where we are currently with water levels in Sonoma County.
I'd be glad to. Thanks, Ariana, and thanks for Gen H for hosting this forum on infrastructure. The good news is that we're probably in the best shape we have ever been at this time of year with the amounts of water that are in our two reservoirs. So I want to briefly describe our system for your viewers. We are the co-managers, along with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, of two reservoirs. The first is a smaller reservoir up in Mendocino County called Lake Mendocino, or Coyote Valley Dam. And the second is a larger reservoir built in the, filling up in the 80s. It's Lake Sonoma, or Warm Springs Dam. And just for the sake of numbers, Lake Sonoma currently holds about 227,000 acre feet of water out of a total storage capacity of 245,000. So darn near full. Lake Mendocino, the smaller reservoir, but equally important, has about 72,000 acre feet right now. And it has a total capacity of 84,000. So recognizing this, I would just say that we manage this system. The Russian River is the source of our supply, and it's kind of like our natural pipeline. So it's incumbent upon all of us to be taking care of the Russian River. It provides clean, reliable, essential water supply to over 600,000 customers, and is the ability to confidently go forward and supply that water. So it's important to know that it's a large ecosystem. It's capable of delivering quite a bit, but as anyone that's been in this community for a while, the last 3 years prior have been some of the driest on record, in which we saw record low storage in our reservoirs. So the message here is that we have to, as water managers, manage to extremes: multi-year drought and substantial amounts of what are called atmospheric rivers. That's the one terminology I hope people will go home tonight with. Is our extreme weather is atmospheric rivers, which come in off the West Coast and stall out over the mountainous areas and wreak a lot of havoc and cause flooding, but they also provide our water supply. We had 9 of them last year, which is almost a record amount. So in a nutshell, we're doing well now, and our challenge is to be able to do it in dry years as well.
Thank you, Grant. And it sounds like we're having records on both ends in terms of drought and atmospheric rivers and situations like that, which
over
is
the
all
last
due
decade, yeah,
to climate change. So
indeed.
With that, I'm going to turn to Suzanne for the next question. So as part of your role, you oversaw the creation of the Regional Climate Protection Authority, the RCPA, and water, or lack of water, or too much water, has been at the forefront of everyone's mind. How was this incorporated into planning for climate resiliency for Sonoma County?
Thanks, Ariana. And again, thanks to Gen H for inviting us to be part of this discussion. The role of infrastructure, whether it's transportation, climate, water, and how that affects the ability for us to house the folks in our community, I think is a really interesting policy discussion. And I'm glad you're bringing that to the community to be part of that discussion. So the Regional Climate Protection Authority, just to kind of bring everyone up to speed on what that organization is, it was created by the state legislature at the request of all of the cities and the county here in Sonoma County. And the idea behind it was to address climate change. We need to cross jurisdictional boundaries. We can't just operate in the city of Cotati or in the unincorporated county outside of Cloverdale. You know, it's a system that we need to address from a community-wide perspective. And one of the ways to do that is to ensure there's collaboration and good communication at that local government level. So in addition to like learning from each other and what people are doing, it helps us establish priorities and what will be most effective to implement at the local government level. In terms of how we are looking at water, first of all, we partner with the Water Agency. They've been huge supporters of the creation of the RCPA and the existence of the RCPA since day one. And Grant and I do go back a ways. We've worked together since the early 90s. So we know each other. You know, we've had a great working relationship since literally 1992. But the manner in which we've integrated the climate planning work and the Water Agency's expertise with climate planning is to look at ways in which we can support local governments in things like water conservation. So in the built environment or in landscape scale environment, sometimes even with ag practices, how can we facilitate and help implement programs and projects in the community that are focused on water conservation? One of the ways we've done that in 2 communities so far in Sonoma County, but expanding beyond our region, beyond our county in the near future, is a program called Water Upgrade Saves. And that allows people to do water conservation measures but not have to pay for it up front. It comes out of the savings that they would recognize in their water bill. So there's no cost to either the local government who's doing the program or to the individual consumer. In fact, they're going to end up saving money. So trying to come up with innovative financing tools, innovative programs that help people conserve that water. So in the lean years, we are able to make sure we don't have to do dramatic things like rationing, but rather have that ability to manage the resources we do have.
That sounds like a win-win, Suzanne. And it's
Absolutely
part of the messaging that we see as residents, either when it's a time of drought or when we are getting rains, and are able to then see, you know, what we should be doing at that time, given what's taking place. And I do have to say, in 1992, I was 4 years old. So it's very humbling to hear how long so much of this work has been happening for. You know, I feel like I've been hearing about water and droughts not too long ago, but clearly it's been happening for decades and decades here. And a lot of people have invested energy and time into making sure that we're in a good place currently. And with that, we're going to turn back over to you, Grant, to get to a really meaty question here. So we know that there's a need for more housing in our county. That's a given. Yet at the same time, there's concerns about the availability of water to meet that increased need and how we're going to make that happen. So what impact will more housing have on water availability locally?
Well, that's a great question. I get that all the time, actually. I think it's important to put this in context as our region, because we wholesale water from the Russian River to the cities and towns of Sonoma and Marin County. And they have a series of very aggressive implementation programs for water use efficiency. They're getting tighter and tighter all the time. But that's a good thing, because the most reliable water, the most reliable new water, is the water that's conserved. And that's always been incorporated into what's called the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. And the per capita water use over the years, since before you were born, is actually declined. We've had increasing population and declining per capita water use. And that's largely because we've got conservation as a way of life in our community. Increasingly in the state, they're looking at every available drop being too important to waste. My sense when it comes to housing is that I point to the fact that our cities and municipalities have urban water management plans that project out to currently 2040 and show that our system is redundant enough to provide water supply for the needs of our community out till 2040, which is a good while. That's a good period of time to be basing from. These are updated every 5 years, so we're always having to identify current water and future water. But to put this in perspective, I was talking to a group the other day about how Sonoma Water has been working with Scripps Institute for Oceanography down at UC San Diego and a lot of our partners on better forecasting of when our rain events are coming in, and whether the water that comes in off those atmospheric rivers is going to dump above our reservoirs, in which case you want to vacate and make room for that new water, or if they're going to fall, the precipitation is going to be below our reservoirs. And so this is something called forecast-informed reservoir operations. And I raise it because when I was reading to you earlier about the amount of water that's in our 2 reservoirs, we have 30,000 acre feet of more water this year, not just because of the rain, but because of a decades-long effort to manage water more effectively based off current science, current predictive capability on forecasting precipitation. And so with 30,000 acre feet, it's 11,000 left in Lake Sonoma and about 20,000 in 11,000 in Lake Mendocino, 20,000 in Lake Sonoma. That's where I get the figure of 30,000 acre feet of new water this year that we've held back to make available. We sell on an annual basis 40,000 acre feet of water in a given year. So 3/4 of the amount that we sell is behind our reservoirs right now, because we've made these technical innovations working in collaboration with state leaders and the science community, the academic community. Our board of directors has allowed us the luxury to go out and do a better job of forecasting and working with the experts. So really, to say that again, why I'm confident that we can meet the needs is that we've got this new FERO program. There's 30,000 acre feet of water that wouldn't have been in either of those reservoirs had we not done this. And that's available then for meeting needs in the community. So that's how I kind of address that in a short-wind answer. Suzanne, I forgot to say, it has been such a pleasure working with you over the last 30 years. You are amazing. I know you've earned your retirement, but it's nice to kind of go out on a Zoom with you like this.
Thanks, Grant. Can I just add a little bit to that? Not specific, because Grant is clearly the expert on the waterfront, but just a little bit more generally, because he mentioned sort of the technology, but also just the planning function. And I think what sometimes maybe gets a little lost is how long-range planning happens at a local government level and how critically important it is, so that when you have new housing projects, it's not like they're popping up and no one had any expectation. Everybody's general plan, and when I say everybody, I mean each city or the county of Sonoma has a general plan that has, for example, a water element. And they have housing projections, and then their water projections that go along with that housing. And so there's assumptions of growth, and there's a lot of expertise and planning that goes into assessing what that's going to look like. And hand in hand with that is the building codes. And so new development, if you're building a home today or a multi-family unit or apartments, the efficiency, whether it's energy, water, all of that is so much greater than it was 25 years ago, that you're really able to add new housing capacity with much less impact on the resources that if you were to just build like you did in the 80s, you would be in a much different spot. But we're much more, I'm going to say, advanced in terms of technology and building codes and the manner in which we create those new housing units, that we can accommodate that growth more readily, given even our constraints with, be it energy, water, et cetera.
Thank you for jumping in to share that, Suzanne. And I'd like to expand on that with you. Could you tell us about the type of housing that is critical to focus on as we build to then ensure that we are remaining efficient when it comes to water and energy and all of those other critical components?
I think what's really, we're at sort of this dynamic point in Sonoma County, especially in Santa Rosa, as obviously the largest city, of adding different types of housing stock to our community. This has historically been a county of single-family homes and not a lot of other options. Some communities, a little bit more than others, have multifamily housing, like Rohnert Park has more of that, has historically had more of that. Petaluma's done a pretty robust job, and Windsor more recently. But Santa Rosa is really coming into the fore, and as the largest city, I think, you know, that's sort of where some critical mass around multifamily housing is so important. And so on the transportation side, I have often said throughout my career, we need all the things. We needed, you know, an improved Highway 101. We needed the SMART train. We need better bike and pedestrian facilities. We need more transit. We need all the things. And it's a similar feeling, I think, with housing, that we need all the types, right? We need to provide, we need to have this housing stock that can work for everyone in our community. And that's going to look different for each person. And so that's something that I think our planning directors in each of the cities and the county have taken to heart more and more recently, that while we have historically had more single family homes than not, changing that mix is where we're focused now. And that helps not only on the efficiency side, but also on the transportation infrastructure side, where now that we have the SMART train, you can build higher density housing around those rail stations with a pretty high degree of confidence that the rail station is not going to move, because it's pretty hard to move a train. You can move a bus stop pretty easily, and so that confidence level isn't as high. But if you are going to attract both jobs and housing along that rail corridor, knowing where that train's going to stop and have that connectivity is a key part. And accessing those stops is another key aspect, whether, you know, kind of a 1 mile radius around those stops provides a really great planning opportunity for bike and pedestrian access that's safe and secure. So there's an ability for people to be mobile using multiple modes really easily. So that's that interconnectivity between transportation and housing that I think we're all of our cities are really striving towards.
Thanks, Suzanne. Grant, I want to bring you into this conversation to hear from your perspective at the water agency. Does sprawl have an impact on water availability? Does the type of housing have an impact? Is that something that you can speak?
Well, I think I can go back 30 years or so and just highlight what our community has done in terms of urban growth boundaries, trying to consolidate growth in municipal areas where you already have. The type of housing that Suzanne was talking about earlier is actually more efficient. And so you see per capita water use dramatically reduced over new housing stock that's built now as opposed to 1970s, 1980s. And as it gets replaced, the building and housing codes are getting more restrictive. So the per capita water use is the type of thing that we're building into our planning, as was mentioned earlier. I also think that if we don't have to extend our transmission lines and our water supply lines out further into the ag and open space areas, you don't have stranded assets that you have to maintain. So we've got multiple $1 million worth of investment in our backbone transmission system that we all share. And the challenge is to maintain that and to keep that whole. The more you add to that system, the costlier it gets and the more maintenance is going to be required. It's sort of a never-ending cycle. So the type of consolidation, focused development in urban areas has proven to be a very smart move. And for water supply, it allows us not to extend and end up with stranded assets.
We put ourselves in a situation where then we're having to pay for that infrastructure.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Suzanne, do you have anything to add in terms of the cost of infrastructure and why that's so important to take into consideration?
Well, I think I would just add that as we build in our cities where there is more infrastructure, there is still a need to improve that infrastructure. It is, you know, whether it's sewer lines or water lines or transportation, you know, retrofitting isn't always easy. So if you look at, you know, we have a built downtown in pick whichever city, there's going to be some infrastructure needs around that. But I do think that provides also an opportunity because a lot of that infrastructure isn't the most modern infrastructure. You know, if you were downtown Santa Rosa, you know, you've got sewer lines that are aging out, and you know, you've got an opportunity then to make sure what gets put in place has not just greater capacity but greater efficiency. And so that combination of working with the development community and the utilities to ensure that the capacity is there, I think that's a really great opportunity, and one that I think there's also public, you know, there's public funds that can be brought to bear in partnership with the private sector.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Grant, we're going to circle back to you for this one. So we know that we're currently having more of a precipitation this year, but that droughts are regardless going to be a part of our future because of climate change and those extremes. What are some of the initiatives that Sonoma Water has in the works to ensure that regardless of the extremes that may come, we will have sufficient water capacity for current and future?
That's a great question. I get that one too, increasingly as this weather whiplash that we're experiencing. But I mentioned one. I'm very, very pleased with the outcome of the forecast-informed reservoir operations, having water supply behind our reservoirs that can be carried over to the drier times of the year that we need. Interestingly enough, that program is being expanded now throughout Southern California, Northern California, and parts east. New York's actually looking at adopting a FIRO project on some of the Delaware River holdings they have. So I really am grateful to the board of Sonoma Water, which also is the board of supervisors for Sonoma County, for letting us innovate and do some of the things like help create the Regional Climate Protection Authority and other innovative projects that are going to be groundbreaking. So I look ahead and I think in terms of drought resiliency, we've got to be taking more advantage of those extremes and being able to take water when it's available. In the winter months, it's in some ways quite a bit of water that's actually causing flooding in some areas. We need to be able to take that water and put it into our transmission system and take it into areas for storage later. In addition, we need to use our existing infrastructure to be able to recharge groundwater. We haven't talked at all about groundwater tonight, but that's a very important component of our water supply. A lot of well owners, a lot of areas in the outside the urban areas that rely on groundwater for their source of water. We've fortunately had 3 groundwater sustainability agencies lift in the last few years since 2014. They are charged with managing that water supply in a sustainable manner, and that's going to be county and city representatives governing those recharges. So the innovation comes from taking what we know will work and putting projects into the ground that will deliver reliability. and have water that you can carry over when it's needed in the summer dry months, and take it when it's available in the water in the winter months. So increasingly you're seeing something called aquifer storage and recharge, and we'll be seeing some of those projects come online. We've got 3 wells in the Santa Rosa Plain that we're currently retrofitting to be able to do that. The city of Sonoma has a pilot project that's been put online, taking water from our transmission system, putting it into that groundwater table to demonstrate that this can be a viable pathway forward. So again, I'm really appreciating the fact that our board allows us to go innovate, work with the academic community, work with the folks that want to innovate and bring that into Sonoma County. It's not going to go talk about tonight, but one of the things that is not always remembered, and obviously some weren't even born then, but back in 2008, we were able to help put forward Sonoma Clean Power. The Board of Supervisors asked Sonoma Water and the business community and others to work and to see whether we could take advantage of that type of program. And it was called Community Choice Aggregation, and we did it. And today, as a result of that, you've got revenue coming in to invest in renewables, which is part of the equation. You mentioned climate change. That's something that we're all affected by. That same area back in 2008 asked us to become carbon free as a water agency, and we did it by 2015. We're now carbon free. We're one of the only places in the country where you can say that your water molecule is carbon free coming out of the tap. We expect other places to learn from our experience. We gladly share it and help other communities come along that they don't have the advantages that Sonoma and our region does. We are really a wonderful community. I have a high degree of confidence that our policymakers and the folks that are working on planning for housing and working on transportation and water supply can get it. They are supported in doing that, and that is sort of the magic potion that we need, is to innovate and stay ahead of the curve.
It sounds like that innovation not only benefits us, but then other communities around the country and beyond who can then learn from what we're doing here in Sonoma County.
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne, are there any initiatives that you'd like to highlight along these same lines from RCPA or Sonoma County Transportation Authority?
There's one in particular I would like to mention, and it's maybe sounds a little bit of like not directly related, but I think it is related. And that is our update to our active transportation plan. Getting people out of their cars and providing safe ways for people to walk and bike for a lot of their trips is a really important part of reducing our emissions, but also making a healthy community and a community that feels welcoming. And it's also affordable. So, you know, with we are responsible for developing sort of that overall bike and pedestrian plan that knits together the priorities of all of the communities. And we are gearing up for a major update to that active transportation plan through the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. And part of, I think what's exciting about that is there's more and more grant funding available for those types of projects. So the more we have our act together locally with priorities and clear vision about what a really great network of bikeways will look like and how it will connect communities, will put us in a position to bring more resources to the county and get those projects built. You know, I think that's one big ticket item that is in front of us with the SCTA. On the climate side, you know, we are exploring the best ways in which we can address resiliency from a broad community perspective. And it's looking at how we maximize the resilience of our natural and working lands is a huge priority. The built environment is a big piece of what we need to work on, but also taking advantage of the open space and public space that we have, especially in the unincorporated counties, and how we can tap into that to ensure we're capturing carbon. We're never going to get to zero carbon emissions, so we have to be able to absorb carbon as well in our open spaces to get to that net zero. So I think those are a couple of big ticket items that the SCTA and the RCPA are going to be working on going forward.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. And before we turn to the audience questions, I do have one other question for Grant in terms of groundwater, which is something that you mentioned earlier. So if we end up in a long-term drought and end up rationing water, what is the capacity of groundwater to keep us supplied?
That's a great question. I mentioned that we have 3 groundwater sustainable management agencies lifted. There's actually a need probably to cover another, which is the Alexander Valley up north, another area. The way that these came to being back in 2014, then Governor Jerry Brown authorized the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and signed it into law. So ever since then, we've been putting these up. These were medium and high priority groundwater basins. So it's Petaluma, Sonoma Valley, and the Santa Rosa Plain. And I think in the not too distant future, you're looking at the Alexander Valley probably coming online. So their whole purpose is to manage, to understand, to monitor the groundwater tables that we rely on and make sure that they're sustainable, that they're not taking more out than they're putting back in. Collectively, as a community, we have to maintain that. It's essentially a second out-of-sight reservoir. So you're looking at our surface water supply, which is Mendocino and Sonoma, those 2 lakes, and the groundwater basins, and making sure they're managed together. So California, I think, was the last state to come online to actually do this, because groundwater management is not an uncontroversial topic. Folks that have been buying their own wells and sinking getting their water that way don't want to be paying for that any more than they have to. So we've got to find a way to make sure that there is the absolute minimum that's needed to convey a sustainable groundwater basin. So it's an active discussion right now. But because we've got the intent to make sure you understand if a groundwater basin's being overdrafted, or if there is seawater intrusion that's occurring in a basin, we absolutely have to do this. Too long we've been ignoring that. And I think our groundwater basins are going to be a form of our piggy bank in the near future, not the near future, but several years from now. You're going to be looking at recharging those basins. So you've got a sustainable supply that you can take out for a rainy day. And so fortunately, there's a lot of headway going on there. To actually say what that is, it's different for every groundwater basin, which is why I can't tell you exactly what. It depends on which basin you're in. And I just think there's a lot of work for bright folks that come out of Gen H that are going to come in and figure this stuff out long after we're gone, how to do that better.
That's reassuring, Grant. Thank you. This other one I think is also for you, but feel free to jump in, Suzanne. And it's a Q&A question. How much of the water supplied by the water agency is essentially used as transportation? For example, moves human waste to the Llano Road treatment plant.
That's a great question. And I can actually say that I don't know the answer to that. I'm not ashamed to admit it. We don't run there is a wonderful treatment plant, which is on Llano Road. It's part of Santa Rosa sub-regional system that the communities, say from Cotati, Rohnert Park, Santa Rosa, buy into and manage. It's the largest facility we have. It's also tied to one of the best projects I'm aware of, which is the Geysers Project, taking wastewater up to the Maiquemas into Lake County and creating energy. To say exactly how much of our water is required to do that, I cannot tell you tonight how to do that. It's a portion. I will say one thing I do ask people to do is take a look at your utility bill. And so often is the case, the treatment of wastewater is in some cases double what the payment is for water supply, for pure drinking water. And that's just because there's a lot more to handling and treating and disposing or recycling that wastewater. So roundabout way of saying, I don't have the answer to that. I hope that's close enough.
Thank you. For this next one, I think this is for you, Suzanne. how do different types of housing compare when looking at waste, transmission loss? For example, an 8-unit small apartment building compared to a street with 8 single-family detached homes.
I definitely do not know the answer to that question. And I would kick it over to Grant as the general manager of some wastewater facilities, I believe, they're sanitation districts. But yeah, I'm sorry, that is not my area of expertise.
Totally okay. Do you have anything to add on that, Grant, or should we go to the next one?
You know, honestly, I don't mean to dismiss that question, but I don't have the answer off the top of my head either. It's great that all your audience members can stump the folks that are here. Thanks very much. Really appreciate that.
All right, we have this one here then.
We need a lifeline, or like call a friend.
Right, call Phil. This one is for you, Grant. So you mentioned that per capita water usage has declined since the early 80s. Can you explain a bit more about how that is and what exactly the amount is? For example, water efficient landscaping codes, percent decline in capita water use, things like that.
Yeah, I'd say I go back to the mid 70s, 1976, 1977 is kind of referred to as the drought on record, where you had 2 back-to-back years very, very dry. The equivalent of that would have been the 3 prior years for us in 2021, 22. Basically, the state and the building codes and all of the water managers have got to be more efficient. It is the most reliable, the most cost-effective way to get new water is conserving. And so you're looking at numbers of bills that go that are introduced every year to make us more efficient. Some requiring dual plumbing, some requiring swapping out different technologies. In fact, the program that Suzanne was talking about that was actually allowing customers to make the type of decisions to become more efficient and put that on their property tax bill or their water bill or their sanitation bill or their energy bill. Those are the types of things that allow us to get more and more efficient. Can I quantify it? No, but I can say our per capita water use over that time period, you've had a meteoric rise in population since that period in the 70s, but the per capita water use has actually gone down dramatically, and we've held that. We have a year 2013 is the year that we look to measure, and ever since then, we are sometimes tracking 20% less water used per capita, per person, than during that time, because it's becoming a way of life. We're becoming more efficient and we're using less water. We're practicing good water management tactics and we're investing in that. So there's more to come. I would predict the legislature next year, they're going to be looking at really almost banning turf, just artificial, ornamental turf that does not have a function. City of Santa Rosa is really taking some good leadership and becoming more efficient, leading the way, and I applaud them.
You know,
Thank you.
I would just to throw some positive vibes at Grant and the water agency and the other utilities. I do think while it has been horrible that we've had to suffer through many years of drought, the I'm going to say marketing, but the messaging around what that is and why and how you can do your part is something that this community has rallied behind. But it takes them knowing a little bit more and feeling comfortable with the data and the information. And I think the Sonoma Water and Santa Rosa and the other water utilities in this county have done a really good job of messaging that. And whether you're a kid growing up, you know, trying to understand like, oh, I'm not flushing the toilet every time, and here's why, or no, we don't have lawns on every front, you know, in front of every single family home anymore. Like those things are, you know, that's what's getting us to this lower per capita water use number. I mean, those are key factors, but it has to do with like a community mindedness that is fostered by people having good, solid information to understand the situation.
Right. It is transforming our community, and it's house by house, family by family, taking that initiative based on the messaging that they've been hearing over the years. This actually lines up a question for you, Suzanne. You'd mentioned creating more transit-oriented development and how that could help create a healthier community, people who would be able to ride their bikes and be able to walk. And that's also something that's individually driven, but it takes having that right infrastructure in place for it to happen. Could you tell us about regional efforts that are underway, like MTC, to help encourage and drive transit-oriented development? And will these efforts support our regional goals?
Absolutely. So there's kind of the wonky part of it, which is the planning side. And more and more our regional planning and our county-wide, and when I say region, I mean like the 9-county Bay Area planning efforts are driven by what are the housing numbers going to be? What are the greenhouse gas emissions going to be? How do we reduce them by a certain amount that's established and required by the state? And then what's our transportation infrastructure going to look like? Those three pieces of the puzzle have to fit together in a long-range plan that gets adopted at the regional level. And then that plan dictates how the money flows to projects. And so more and more, we are seeing that projects that are focused on active transportation or transit are scoring better and are able to receive more funds than what you might have seen 20 years ago, where freeway projects would be more appealing. And, you know, it gets back to that long-range planning that we do locally with our general plans. Highway 101, as an example. It took us 20 plus years to add a third lane to Highway 101, but it was always in everybody's general plan. You know, it's not in everybody's general plan is a fourth lane in each direction. So we have what we have on Highway 101, and we need to plan around that. It's not going to get wider. The next lanes are the smart rail, right? Like that's where the new capacity can be added. So that's a long way of saying, you know, the long range planning on transportation is sort of shifting from add more lanes, like do what you planned to a point, and then we're shifting to that added capacity and ability to improve mobility is going to take the form of transit, whether it's buses or trains, and then bike and pedestrian access. And then also some new technologies. You know, you've got Uber and Lyft and things like that. That's not really going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions unless they're electric vehicles. But the ability to have more sort of on-demand van pooling that uses technologies to connect people so that you're sharing vehicles is also a use of technology that I think will help in the future.
Great, thank you. And once we maximize, we start thinking smart and looking at where we can expand in other areas. Yes. Okay, we have one more question from the audience. And this one is for you, Grant. It's regarding the Sonoma Development Center. Does Sonoma Valley have the capacity to support increased development in light of the new development proposal at the Sonoma Development Center? We've heard from you, Grant, that our supply levels are really looking good. What water supplies might support the valley and this project?
That's a great question. The Sonoma Developmental Center is a huge opportunity for the valley. It's something that's got a long history. Fortunately, there is a retailer there, the Valley of the Moon Water District, that would like to be able to serve that community once it's planned. I also think that there are other attributes that need to also be considered, however, and that is they've got 2 reservoirs on that property. You've got a prime area for groundwater recharge that could be tapped there. There's also some strong needs to upgrade the sewer capacity there with a brand new system. It's completely dilapidated. It was talked about earlier about aging, crumbling infrastructure that no longer works. That's one of the sites still that no longer works. So there is, we can make water available depending on what the ultimate design footprint is that the state and the county are going to determine is feasible. It'll have to be. I think there's an opportunity there to be able to demonstrate the types of high efficient water use efficiency opportunities for whatever gets built there, and to make sure you're putting in water use efficient landscape that are drought tolerant. It should be an innovative area. One of the ideas that I'm enamored with there is an institution somewhere on the campus there that would be incentivizing our response to climate change and ensuring that we're doing, finding the economic engines that will propel us to make a more resilient future. There's no reason that Sonoma County and the Development Center can't include that concept. And fortunately, the California Coastal Conservancy has awarded some funds to Sonoma County, to Permit Sonoma, to help see if we can't envision something very special there. So it becomes a demonstration on how to use water more efficiently, how to create more renewable energy, how to be more integrated. It's a fabulous opportunity, but I know it's got a long way to go. And I think the policymakers are going to have to weigh in the not too distant future on what it is that we're going to see there.
Sounds promising. Thank you, Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to end this on a positive note. So I want to ask the two of you, what gives you hope for a sustainable future in Sonoma?
Suzanne, you want to go first?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, I am not a pessimist about this stuff. It's, you know, it maybe could be easy to be cynical about some of this or doom and gloom, but having been in this community as long as I have and worked in the public sector and been engaged with members of the community for a pretty good period of time, this is a community that cares about each other. You know, has its moments. I'm not gonna, you know, totally sugarcoat it, but you know, we pull together, and there is, I think there's a real understanding and appreciation for addressing climate change, for practical approaches. You know, we've been through some stuff, you know, like starting in 2017 with the fires, you know, 1-2 punch with another round of fires in 2019. Then you've got COVID, then you've got Black Lives Matter. You've got all of these things that have sort of, it could harden us as a community. And I don't think that's happened. I think I hope, you know, that we've been able to take those punches and feel a little bit stronger about ourselves, and that we can work together. So I'm optimistic. It's, you know, it can be some tough times. It's tough to be in the world right now, but I feel like if we're going to be in the world, this is a pretty good place to be in Sonoma County.
We're learning, we're responding, we're adapting. Sounds beautiful.
Exactly.
Grant, what would you like to add?
You know, I should just leave it there where Suzanne's got her pearls of wisdom, and she always does. Thank you for your years of service, Suzanne. I guess I'm gonna keep it short. Every year, we reach about 30,000 kids in the community at our water education center, where we have a wonderful viewing gallery for fish that are migrating right now. Right now, it's Chinook salmon, and you can see them if you're out there at night. But basically, it's those 30,000 kids per year, age levels, to learn about where their water supply comes from, how important the Russian River is, what they can do to make sure they protect it. And then we've partnered with Sonoma Clean Power to do a renewable energy portfolio, talk about energy and that nexus. And you think about 1 year's 30,000, and you got 60,000 the second year. I am confident that those kids that are coming through our school systems and our education programs, we have some great nonprofits that are partnering. The Sonoma Community Foundation has just invested in this. It's called SEEK, and it's Education Collaborative, that we make sure that all kids get exposed to environmental protection and restoration opportunities, and energy efficiency. The magnitude of that over time gives me tremendous hope in the future. And I'm so counting on the next generation of folks that are engaged in policy that are going to think about how to build housing that's going to be ever more efficient, but also working for all different classes and types. So yeah, we've got very engaged members of the public. You have elected officials that are willing to state their claim and work hard and participate. We've got a major challenge ahead of us, but I also share Suzanne's enthusiasm that we have the potential there of that next generation to come in and do it better than we did. And I'm quite sure they're going to.
What a beautiful thought to end on. That generation is going to build on all the work that's taken place through now. And I'm sure that then they're going to have a webinar years from now where they're talking about all the innovative things that are in place and how they've made Sonoma County even more sustainable. So, thank you both. This has been truly an honor to spend some time with you and have this conversation. I know I've learned quite a bit. I hope the audience members have as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for being Suzanne and Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Cal.
All right. Well, thank you, Grant and Suzanne, and a special thanks to Ariana as well for being here with us today. This has been an incredible conversation. I don't know about all of you, but I certainly learned quite a few things I did not know. So thank you all for being here and for providing your your expertise on these subject matters. It's much appreciated. So charting a course for a more sustainable future certainly takes strong communication, collaboration, and a healthy dose of creativity and bold action. So again, thank you. And I'd really like to invite folks, if before you check out with us tonight, if you could join us with just taking a quick moment to answer a few questions on a poll that'll pop up on your screen momentarily, we would greatly appreciate it. So that will be popping up right now. And if you could just take a moment to answer that, we would, like I said, greatly appreciate it. So we'll just take a quick minute to do all of that, and then we'll move right on. And by the way, just so everyone knows, we will be keeping track of all the questions that were submitted to us today, and we'd be happy to get back to you with some information at a later time. So if your question to get answered, please just stand by. We'll do our best to get you a response if we're able to. Or you're always welcome, if you'd like to, you can reach out to either myself, my email is Calum, C-A-L-U-M, @generationhousing.org, or you can reach out to info@generationhousing.org, and we'd be happy to engage you in conversation. All right. Thank you for the gift of your feedback. This helps us better evaluate our educational opportunities and obviously continue in this work. So again, I'd just like to remind everyone, please, we certainly invite you to send your thoughts and any additional questions to info@generationhousing.org. So before we move on, thanks again to Ariana, Grant, and Suzanne. We do have a couple more things if folks want to stick around. First and foremost, I would like to just share one of the new initiatives that we have rolled out recently. So we'd really like you to join us and learn more about our North Bay Next initiative. It's a series of policy goals that will build on our existing resources to bring more and more affordable housing to the county. So we're recommending 5 bold policies we believe each jurisdiction is capable of enacting. And each of these is based on successful models we have seen executed elsewhere, sometimes from within California and sometimes from elsewhere. And they're really intended to respond to claims local policy cannot impact the very real constraints we face in building. So these 5 policies are focused on funding affordable housing, ending exclusionary zoning, approving housing with purpose and not for the neighborhood fit, targeting fees to incentivize the hardest to build housing, and finally getting rid of some of those onerous parking minimums. And these are really realistic but bold steps that we have formulated with, with our team and with folks in the community. And we believe if implemented, they would be incredibly effective at really helping realize some of the goals and initiatives we're trying to achieve here regionally. So links to the policies are shared in the chat. You can read, become involved, and speak up at public hearings. We guarantee that we will not allow any of these kind of myths or what have you that people spread to certainly undermine your ability to advocate for the sustainable future we're trying to realize together. And these policies really are just here to help facilitate greater housing production, really to achieve the vision that Suzanne and Grant and, I think really laid out for us today. And certainly there are tremendous opportunities. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Omar Lopez, our program associate. He has one final thing to share before we close things out for this evening.
Hi, everybody. My name is Omar. I just want to take a moment to express our gratitude to our members. Your support is really what empowers our work. Along with over 200 other members, you help us say yes to housing, amplifying the voices of those affected by housing shortages and affordability challenges, thereby strengthening our capacity to make significant progress. If you're not a member, I really, really encourage you to become one. A link to sign up should be appearing magically in the chat. I also really want to extend a special thanks to our catalyzing members who consistently support our work year after year, and they really help us sustain our momentum. And lastly, I promise, last thing for me, I want to thank our founders who took a really significant leap of faith and made a critical investment at the outset of our mission. And thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much, Omar. And just an FYI, we'd like to invite all of you to attend our next webinar, Housing as Economic Health, on Thursday, November 2nd from 6 to 7:15 p.m. That link should also be magically appearing in your chat momentarily. And so that about wraps it all up. Thanks again to everyone who joined us this evening for our webinar. We will be posting a video recording of today's webinar on our YouTube channel in the next few days. So please share that with anyone who wasn't able to join us and might be interested in learning more about our infrastructure capacity. We hope this has been an informative experience for you. And in the meantime, stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing all of you again. Have a wonderful
Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.